Hello, it's Dr. LA. I'm the one who taught you a couple of weeks ago on data analysis. Anyway, today we're going to talk about mixed methods research. So this is looking at using both quantitative and qualitative research methods. I followed the chapter very closely for this lecture, just so you know, but I also advise that you read chapter 10 of your text. The learning outcomes for this unit are to be able to describe mixed methods research, explain when people should be using mixed methods, the ways that we actually combine quantitative and qualitative research. You should also be able to consider how to integrate quantitative and qualitative data analysis approaches, like when you're analyzing the data. And there's different strengths and challenges of mixed methods research. And finally, the main point of this is that you need to appreciate that mixed methods research is not just having quantitative and qualitative research together. There's an approach to mixed methods. So in the School of Human Kinetics and Recreation, I guess I do use a lot of mixed methods. So as you may recall, I'm a more quantitative researcher, really. I do survey methods, and that's what in social sciences we would consider survey research to be quantitative. It is often subjective, but it's still numerical. So quantitative research is really, as you guys have learned this term, you're really testing a theory, you're looking at relationships among variables. It typically employs, experimental design, but it can also be surveys as well. Where qualitative research is more for gathering in-depth understanding of a phenomena to really explain the experience of a group or an event, or of a specific type of person. So mixed methods then obviously combines quantitative and qualitative forms of research. So this can take various formats. For example, I was doing a study with looking at fly fishing with Dr. Bissett and Dr. T.A. Loeffler. So Fabien was we were looking at the experience of fly fishing, the psychological and physiological aspects of it. So we were first going to be doing quantitative, experimental research, Dr. Bissett's work. So this was going to be, actually having people fly fish and us taking measurements from them, and then also going into the lab and I'm not I can't remember all the measures that Fabien was going to do, but you're like VO2 max and heart rate and all these sorts of things. And then next was interviews, which was and photo elicitation, and that was the work for TA. And then finally was going to be the survey. And it was going to be informed by the focus group. I kind of say all this in past tense because unfortunately the full project never went through. We had some funding issues. So in the chapter, they have this nice table that looks at the defining characteristics of quantitative and qualitative research designs. So, for example, quantitative is focused, it's very objective. You're trying to not be biased at all. And it is predominantly, objective measures, although survey research could be, a lot of them are they've been tested, so they can be objective, but some survey stuff can be subjective as well. And, it's really caring about validity and reliability and is based on, experimental design and hypothesis testing. Whereas qualitative research is looking at multiple meanings. It's not concerned about biases. In fact, as a researcher, you need to explain your worldview or how you might, how your experiences influences, how you are perceiving your study. And, it's usually a smaller sample size. For example, grad students might typically do like 8 to 10. Often, though, people try to get maybe more like 20 to 30 participants, though. And, it's using techniques like interviews, focus groups, and, could be natural setting observation, etc. Document analysis, documents and journals, that sort of thing. So mixed methods then is not just simply collecting and analyzing quantitative and qualitative data. It has to be systematic and well thought out. There's like a purposeful mixing of the research. There has to be a reason for why you're using mixed methods. If the overall strength of mixed method study is really is often greater, but it can be you can see people sometimes using it just for the sake of collecting both qualitative and quantitative, but there needs to be some sort of purpose. Mixed methods is becoming increasingly common within kinesiology. And, as myself being, I can do qualitative research and do. It's not my largest strength. Statistics and surveys is my biggest strength. But I really enjoy doing mixed methods because it has allowed me to really collaborate with probably everyone in HKR. Sometimes it's my stats that allows me to collaborate, for example, with my exercise science and physiology folks like Fabien and Kevin and Dwayne in particular, I have. But I've also been able to do part of like larger studies then that do involve like experimental design, survey design, as well as interviews. And I've been able to do this then with some of my kinesiology colleagues, but then also with the social science like my phys ed and recreation folks. So and really kind of you can get at a lot of interesting topics. So it can really be used to answer a range of research questions. For example, mixed methods is very appropriate for the evaluation of programs, whether that's an exercise program, a falls prevention program, that sort of thing. It also can help with measurement of physical activity. So, we do obviously having objective measures is important, looking at the intensity and, duration, etc. of, movement among people. But it's also important to think about, what do people think is physical activity? And, for example, you might discover that there's groups who think that they're getting enough physical activity, or these kind of subjective questions that are important. Can be used to develop programs as well, and also inform physical education strategies. So not just collecting surveys or specific fitness measures, but also, for example, looking at curriculum and documentation and that type of thing, and what teachers think and feel. So it's really the research question that ultimately drives what type of research method you use. Sometimes a research question is just appropriate for quantitative. For example, looking at, does a specific stretching routine lead to greater flexibility? Okay, something like that. It's obviously you want objective, quantitative measures. Some are going to be more qualitative, like what is the experience of and perceptions of hospitalization among bariatric patients. That was an example I gave to you when I was speaking about qualitative data analysis. And then some lead to mixed methods designs. And I think this is especially appropriate in HKR because areas of education involve, it's both objective and subjective measures that are important. And same with concepts of health. Like it's not just about how how healthy we are according to certain health indicators, but we also know that, for example, social determinants of health are very important to population health. So we have to look, do people feel healthy? Do they have access to things like resources that they can use to make themselves healthy? And as I've already stressed before, mixed methods for no good reason than just to do it, though, is often disjointed and unfocused. So I'm going to give a few examples of some mixed method studies. So Ukimi was a PhD student of mine, or I was on his committee, supervisory committee, and he's been looking at what are the determinants of access to and utilization of mental and dental health care services among African immigrants in St. John's. And so he's looking at, basically, can people access and utilize, healthcare? Specifically looking at mental and dental because these are areas that have typically not been studied. And he's using a sequential explanatory mixed method design. We'll get to that shortly. I'll be explaining what that is. But basically then, the first part of his study is a survey. He's randomly selecting organizations who that would be, so sort of purposeful sampling in that way, but people that would be aware and have lists and be able to market towards African immigrants in St. John's. So things like churches, specific not-for-profit organizations, etc. And then developing a sampling frame from these different clusters. So that means he's going to select people from all the different organizations and then have a list and then randomly select from there. So it's a little bit of simpler random selection from these different clusters. I'm not going to go into all of this. This is I'm not sure if you learned about that type of sampling technique in this course or not. And then secondly, he's going to interview people from the survey. And it's in the survey, he's asking people if they would be willing to do a follow-up interview. Another example that I might have also mentioned when I was talking about qualitative data analysis is falls prevention among older adults. This was a study by master student Megan Cummings and Dr. Byrne. And they were investigating the effect of a falls prevention program on older adults, as well as looking at their perceptions that older adults have on fall risk and the program itself. So they did mixed methods design. This was the first time Jeannette used this method. And she first had an intervention group. So it was a 10-week fall prevention program focused on balance, strength, and flexibility. They also had a control group. And they did, your typical pre-post quantitative measures. So they were looking at postural sway, the tug test, foam and dome test, ABC scale. I believe that's the confidence scale. And I can't remember what all these other, some are self-efficacy scales, I believe. Anyway, I'm not actually sure. I can't remember what those scales are. Anyway, and then they also did focus groups with the control and intervention groups. And I believe this was just done after the intervention was over. So the quantitative portion of the study did not produce significant results. And it could be, why is this? Well, there could be lots of reasons. It could be that the older adults in the study were already fairly well balanced, so they weren't going to improve that much in that respect. Or it could be that the program wasn't long enough to produce effects. Those are a couple of reasons. But the qualitative portion, the focus groups, they were very informative. And they had 5 themes that emerged from the focus groups. So the program, the falls prevention program, increased people's risk factor awareness. They felt more confidence. It also provided connectedness, like a support group in a sense, or a social network. They felt the program helped with their quality of life, and they also had suggestions for how to promote the program. So this research highlights the importance of a fall prevention program for older adults, not only to keep them healthy, but also for the personal and social benefits that they facilitate. Another time, when should researchers do a mixed method study? Well, it also depends on the researcher. The researcher's characteristics and experience play a role in determining research design. So, for example, my background is more in therapeutic recreation and social psychology of leisure or exercise, and that's more of social science. So there's a lot of I had a lot of teachers and peers who did qualitative interviews a lot, and actually as I got more in my field, I would say that the qualitative methods, there's more qualitative researchers than quantitative. And also in my area, like experimental design is not often used, but we do use a lot of surveys. So that was what I learned more. But I was certainly exposed to qualitative methodology, and I had to take several courses in it, and so I feel that I can speak while I don't always feel. At first, I wasn't always confident being the lead researcher on qualitative. I'm now fine with helping my students, master students with it now. I've had over time, I've had more and more experience. So I also feel comfortable with mixed methods then. So it's, as I said, it could be your education. For example, a lot of our exercise science professors did not they had no exposure to qualitative research. So they might not feel as confident with mixed methods. And again, training your skills and your past research experience. But what's awesome about it is that you can, though, have researchers come together to form research teams for diverse research designs. So you don't need everyone to be confident with it. In mixed methods, you need someone who maybe has had some experience with doing mixed methodology, but otherwise you can have people who specialize in different things. Like the fly fishing project, where obviously Fabien is an expert on measuring, physiological measures related to, sport and physical activity. TA is an expert, a qualitative researcher with expertise on interviewing and photo elicitation, and specifically in outdoor recreation settings. And then I was the survey research expert. Which was my, something that I specialized in when in my PhD as a methodology. We then have to think about planning mixed methods research. So there's different decisions. And so it requires some planning. You have to think about the implementation sequence, the priority, as well as integration of the mixed methods. I'm going to go through each one of these one at a time. First is implementation. So that's about timing of the quantitative and qualitative components. So like, which one comes first? So they can be done concurrently or sequentially. So concurrently means at the same time. Sequentially means one after the other. So concurrent, specifically then, is when quantitative and qualitative data are collected at essentially the exact same time. And this could be, this is often done, for example, someone comes into the lab and you give them a survey and you also do some sort of physiological measures, like, or, let's say blood pressure, heart rate, that sort of thing. So that would be done concurrently. You could also give them, or it could be a survey with then a focus group. So it's happening at the same time, at the same session. An example here is someone was looking at, it was a mixed method study to look at physical activity among Chinese American immigrants who had a risk of diabetes or had type 2 diabetes. So they had 100 individuals in the study, and they used a concurrent mixed methods design. So qualitative and quantitative data are collected at the same time. So they used a short version of the IPAQ, Chinese version. Just as an aside, the International Physical Activity Questionnaire is one of the most widely used scales worldwide for measuring physical activity on a survey. And it has been widely studied and shows very good reliability and validity. And there's also a benefit is that you can actually, like, if you use it, you can look up national, like they collect metadata from all the studies to see, like, what is the typical scores for Canada or the US or that sort of thing. Anyway, and it also has multiple versions in terms of language that have been validated. So they use that to measure participants' level of physical exercise intensity. So survey, it's coming up with a score. So we view this a quantitative. And then they also did semi-structured face-to-face interviews to get qualitative information. And that was about things like knowledge of physical activity, the types of physical activity that the people actually did, and barriers to physical activity. So that's concurrent, same time. Then there's sequential. So that's involving two distinct phases. And this could be, for example, phase 1 quantitative and then phase 2 qualitative. And in this case, there are, you're having, one's coming first, and then there's also, well, I'll explain this in a moment, but, there's, it really also depends what the purpose is. You might have the quantitative data informing the qualitative. So, for example, it is sometimes you do a big survey, and then, for example, in that study by Okimi looking at African immigrants and healthcare utilization, he's first doing a survey, and then he is in phase 2 doing interviewing people who did agree to do the interview, and he's going to collect people, ask people to do the interview who are, some will be, let's say, be high on different indicators that he's measuring. Some of them will be low and some will be in the middle. So he can look at sort of like get a variety of different people based on the survey. So that's one way of doing it. Now in his case, he's not using new participants though. Or it could be, for example, in the fly fishing one, we were going to have the qualitative first, the interviews, and the interviews then were going to help inform the survey research in phase 2, the quantitative component. The next decision is priority. This refers to the weight or emphasis assigned to the quantitative and qualitative data or components of the study. So sometimes you might have, you might give equal weight, or sometimes you might be giving priority to the qualitative component and give less attention to the quantitative, or vice versa. And examples of this would be, sometimes we might do like a focus group, and it's more to help get comments. Like, let's say you're doing a program evaluation. Sometimes you'll find that the information you get in a focus group might be very much like it's really just about the program. It doesn't have a lot of maybe it might not have a lot of depth to it, but it's useful information. And so you might just like summarize that in a table or something like that. So you're giving a lot less weight to the focus group in your presentation compared to, let's say, the objective measures or the survey results or something. The next decision is integration. So this is, how do you mix the qualitative and qualitative components, or not just how, like, do you mix them together? So the integration of the quantitative and qualitative data or components of the study can happen at various stages. It can happen during data collection. It can be integrated in data analysis, in the data interpretation, or in knowledge translation. So you have to then, the researcher has to decide when and how to integrate these components. So for example, if you're in data collection, you might be integrating it. For example, if I'm using interviews to inform my survey, well, it's kind of integrated right there in data collection. Or for example, if I'm doing concurrent mixed methods where my qualitative and quantitative components are happening at the same time. Well, that's happening at data collection. It could happen in data analysis. For example, results from a survey or from some other type of some objective measures might inform how you analyze your qualitative data. And obviously, like, you could keep things totally separate, but you could be using the different components to interpret each other. That's more common. It's more common to make sure that they inform each other. So when and how to integrate is really driven by the research question and your initial planning. And there are really 3 areas where you can merge or converge data during the analysis. So you can have side-by-side comparison, you can have independent analysis, or you can have data transformation. So I'm going to go through these 3 different ways of integrating mixed methods components or mixed methods data together, or not together. So first is side-by-side comparison. So as that implies, the quantitative and qualitative data are analyzed separately. They're separated from each other. One set of findings is presented, and then it's followed by the other. And an example is a mixed method study I did with a lot of HKR folk, including Dr. McGowan, Loeffler, Sullivan, myself, and then there was Dr. Cameron and Dr. Yee, who are no longer at Memorial. And we were evaluating our Saturday play program, the physical literacy program that we hold. And we basically, we collected, we did interviews. We had focus group with key stakeholders. So these were people in St. John's who basically had interest in either physical activity and or youth child development and health. So a wide range of people, like different not-for-profits, youth at risk, disability community, recreation, Newfoundland, Labrador, sports, all that type of stuff. Anyone who also did anything to do with physical literacy among children. And so we did focus groups with those. Then we also did a survey with parents. We did an interview with parents. And then we also did interviews with university physical literacy program providers. So other universities who did these types of physical literacy programs. And so everything was done separately. All of those different bits of data were analyzed on its own, and really 4 studies and articles were published separately. And they weren't not everything was fully integrated together into one. Well, we did kind of at the end, like we had one into one report on the evaluation, but things were fairly separate. You can also do independent analysis. So this is researchers may need findings from one phase to plan the next phase. And I've already given some examples of that. So the data is analyzed independently, but the first phase informs the development of the next phase. So for example, I said to you that we were, going to do interviews with fly fishers, and then this would help to inform the development of the survey. I had certain skills that I was interested in, but it would be able to explain, we could get more information from a wider group than based on these interviews. Here's another example. This was a study done in Australia, and they were focusing on what counts, using exploratory focus groups to enhance the development of a survey in a mixed methods research design. So they did 5 focus groups. I'm sorry, I can't remember what the sample is, but it's in education. So I'm guessing this has to do with something to do with public school. 5 focus groups were conducted, and then the analysis of the focus group data helped to inform the design of the instrument, which specifically was a large-scale cross-sectional, survey. And lastly, you can also data can be, integrated in data transformation. So sometimes people will collect qualitative or quantitative data and then convert it to one or the other. So, for example, you convert one form of data into the other form. So you could, for example, you can qualitize numerical data, meaning you can use numerical data to provide a description of a sample, or explain a bit about their experience, in words. You could, though, which is more common, quantize qualitative data. This is done more in kinesiology, where you're counting codes and themes. You're looking maybe for the frequency of specific words. And for example, I don't know if you've ever used this, but like you could take a whole bunch of people's comments and you can put them into this program. Dr. Loeffler does this, and you create like a word bubble kind of thing where it basically is a frequency of the words that are the most used, and it increases their text by how frequent they are. It's pretty cool. And where you can use it, it's a cool thing to use in workshops to see common themes that people are thinking about. Here's another example. it was a 4610 project that I was involved in. And basically, I'll have to give a little bit of background, but we wanted to look at the cultural validity of physical activity, participation, and barrier questionnaires among older adults in Newfoundland. So I'm a survey researcher, as I've said. I mostly study, so I often use, how often physical activity survey, a questionnaire for that, as well as barriers. And there's a lot of different surveys, and I've really noticed that, especially with older adults in Newfoundland, these measures I don't think work very well culturally here. So especially when you're administering these with older adults in rural Newfoundland, there are issues surrounding how individuals' culture affects their ability to answer the question. So there's different cultural norms surrounding physical activity, especially in rural Newfoundland, and the barriers that they face due to the generational norms for participation, the resources that are available in the area, as well as often being on a fixed income. So what these students did was they had the participants fill out each of these different questionnaires, CHAMPS, IPAC, AAM, and EBBS. That's a barrier scale, and they asked basically recorded the older adult while they were completing them, so that we could get all their mumblings, or they might say oh, I can't answer this question, or and then we also asked specifically, what was it that questionnaire difficult? What were the issues in filling it out? So basically having them, we didn't really care about their results on their survey. We were interested in how they completed the study, or how they completed the survey, the questionnaire. And we found that there was a lot of different issues. Then we took all of that and made it into frequencies. So there was, for example, the LAAM had the most inapplicable survey items, like things that just did not relate to anything to do with the culture of Newfoundland. For example, it could be well, there isn't a swimming pool in your area. It's making assumptions. It's often made for urban areas where there's assumptions that you have all these different resources. And there was also a lot of assumptions about age. They felt like things that they would just never would do. And also things about income, being on a fixed income and that kind of thing. So based on these results, then, you could see which survey am I going to now use. I'm going to use the IPAC and for measuring physical activity, and the EBS for looking at barriers, because they had the least number of issues. So mixed methods research designs, then, this is just a recap. They combine quantitative and qualitative research approaches, and it can take many forms. So remember that concurrent research designs, so that's when it's happening at the same time, include quantitative and qualitative data, at the same time. And this data can be given equal or unequal priority, how you prioritize the qual versus the quan can be different. But you can also do concurrent nested designs, where, this is where one method dominates the other, and it's nested or embedded within it. So here you have concurrent mixed methods designs. On the top, equal priority. It could be you've got qualitative and quantitative data, and it's concurrently being collected at the same time, and it's being given equal weight. However, you could have a nested design where, for example, your qualitative research on the left there, it could be taking precedent, and the quantitative research is a smaller, component of it. Maybe perhaps a little survey, sample description, or that sort of thing. Whereas the quantitative, or the quantitative research could take precedent, where qualitative might be smaller. So, for example, you're maybe more interested in objective measures, and then afterwards you're kind of, doing a focus group just to see some of the general. Let's say you're looking at some sort of exercise program, so you're doing like pre-post measures, and then you have a focus group at the end just to get some more information about how to improve the program. So also recall that the sequential mixed methods research design has two phases then. Data in the first phase is analyzed and used to inform data in the second phase. And this can take, two ways. So we have explanatory sequential mixed methods design. So this is when you have quantitative data is taken first, and this is followed by qualitative research. And it's explanatory because what you're really doing is the qualitative research, which often, let's say, is interview or focus group, you're getting information there to help explain some of the quantitative results. You could be doing an exploratory study, though, using exploratory sequential mixed methods design. And this is when the qualitative data is collected in the first phase and the quantitative data is in the second. And or it could be the other way, I guess. But anyway, here you've got the qualitative research is really then helping you to inform what you're going to collect in the quantitative research. So, for example, the interviews to help then develop your survey, the quantitative component. So there are many benefits of mixed methods research. One thing is that, it provides a balance of the strengths and weaknesses of the different designs. So, for example, in quantitative research, you have a really hard time, getting at psychological factors, which are important, as well as, for example, you can figure out that an exercise program provides physiological improvement, but do we know that people would actually do the program? It's the psychological and structural barriers that are often prevent people from being physically active. So they work well together. You also can have triangulation. So triangulation is when you're using a whole bunch of different types of data, and that enhances then the credibility of your data and results. So, for example, you might be doing a false prevention program. You first keep you've got pre-post physiological measures. These might say that physiologically the false prevention program increased, or helped. You might be then doing interviews and focus groups, and that data might also say that psychologically and socially it really helped. And then you might also be keeping like a journal, like having people keep a log, or maybe some sort of cell phone tracking, or like GPS or accelerometer data or that kind of thing. And you might see from that data that the program increased physical activity outside of the program itself. So I would have then 3 different types of data, some qualitative, some quantitative, that all say that my falls prevention program had improvement, had results. It also helps being comprehensive. You're getting at more of a holistic perspective, I guess, of an event or research question. It also can help with instrument development and testing. And it also assists with sampling, like, it's common that, like, from surveys, you might be able to get interview participants. There are some challenges. For example, you're sometimes blending philosophical worldviews. You know, quantitative researchers are, post-positivist is what it's called, or positivists, and, that is their paradigm. Whereas quite often qualitative researchers or interpretivist researchers are, they have a more subjective understanding. They believe that, truth is in the eye of the beholder, so to speak. So they're very different philosophies, and they can conflict. It can be, the types of data can conflict too. It often can be hard to bring together diverse researchers. It takes a lot of talking and communication to make sure that everyone understands everyone's perspective and what their purpose is. You have to make sure, you've got a little more issues with timelines and resources. It requires more resources to do mixed methods. And, there's a lot of decision making to be done too. And also, sometimes in publications, it can be difficult. Like, if you publish like a whole mixed method study, it's difficult to get like just the space that they want for articles, having both of them in the same thing. Sometimes journals find it hard to find reviewers because they might not have reviewers who are good, feel confident in reviewing mixed methods, or because they only know either qualitative or quantitative, that sort of thing. So those can be some challenges. Your chapter ends with some discussion questions. So you need to be able to say, what is mixed methods research? For your exam, you need to know, like, what are the similarities and differences between like side-by-side comparison and data transformation, and also the different ways to integrate the data in a mixed method study. Pardon me. And there's some recommended readings that were given as well. And that's it then for this unit on mixed methods research. Hope at least you have an appreciation for like when and why you would want to use this method, and understand kind of, it's, pretty cool to be able to use the different types of data collection and different designs to really explore in depth, a certain phenomena or event, and or experience. It also allows you to work really closely with a diverse group of researchers. It broadens your ability to work on different teams. And, for those of you who will be going on to do your honors work, though, this isn't really something that you would propose. It's takes a long time to do mixed methods studies. They take it's double the data collection. So so this isn't something that one would normally take on in an undergraduate thesis, but something that is often used by researchers. It's used even like in program evaluation, and more applied research, I guess you would say, and is commonly done in for graduate work as well.